Shabbat Shalom. I was an annoying philosophy student that was also a double major in political science in my undergrad years. And that meant when I was in the political philosophy class, I was a pain to everyone. Because being a philosophy student, I could really annoy the people that were there only because it was a requirement for their poli-sci degree to have to sit through the political philosophy course, and they had no intention of doing any philosophy if they could avoid it. And I remember very distinctly, very early on in the class, I realized that this was going to be different than our other philosophy courses when the topic came up of human freedom, the topic of slavery. And I began to press my other classmates, this was back in the day when you actually had small classes that fostered discussion, why slavery was wrong. And none of them were able to articulate an actual philosophical underpinning for why slavery was wrong. They tried. I'll give them credit. They tried to say, oh, it's just, people should be free. Why? Well, because, that's what they should be. And they could not get deeper than just that they had accepted that slavery was wrong. Now, don't get me wrong. I was pleased that no one there was advocating for slavery. But as this was a secular discussion, I felt it important that they recognize that they had been part of a community that had chosen to make slavery off limits rather than to really believe that there was some deep philosophical, incontrovertible, secular underpinning for why slavery was wrong. Now, thankfully for myself in the modern times, right, past my undergraduate years, quite a few years past, I don't have to worry about that question anymore of why is slavery wrong. Slavery is wrong because Judaism says it's wrong. Done, right? We can all go home now, straight off to Kiddush and enjoy our lovely desserts. Well, it's not quite that simple. Yes, there is a great deal of complication, and I'd be happy to discuss that during our Kiddush luncheon, of exactly what Judaism says at different eras regarding different forms of slavery. It is a little more complicated than I'm speaking, but by the time we reach the Middle Ages, and certainly in the modern world, there is not a single Jewish community or authority, no matter how radical, no matter how extreme, no matter how so-called traditional, that is in favor of slavery in any way, shape, or form. That we as a community have decided that whatever might have been the circumstances during the past, which we can talk about in Kiddush because it takes a little bit more time, that certainly in the modern world, Judaism is implacably and unalterably opposed to slavery. So we can take solace with that. We don't have to do the philosophical work. Our faith has told us no slavery. Good. Except, I told you I'm an annoying philosophy student. There's always an except. There's always a but or wait about. What about? While I think it is fair to say that everybody in this room believes by their faith or by whatever other source has informed them of this, that slavery is wrong, I am willing to bet that most of us have difficulty identifying slavery. I know, it's one of those other terms that needs clarification. It's all very well and good to say slavery is wrong, but if you can't spot slavery, then it's not actually all that helpful of a statement to make. Let's begin at the simplest level. I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and you tell me whether this person is enslaved or not. Everybody good? Good. We know the rules of the game. So let's start with a nice simple case. You have an Israelite living in ancient Egypt. And if the Israelite wanted to leave Egypt, they were prohibited from doing so. Slavery? Why? Restriction of your motion. So therefore, if I wanted to go to North Korea and the US government said no, I'm a slave. See, I told you I was annoying. What's that? I can go? Absolutely not. It's illegal. And it would be illegal for me or from any of the bordering countries, from China or South Korea. If I try to cross the border, it is illegal in all of those countries, and it is illegal as an American citizen to visit North Korea, except on government duties under certain circumstances in the DMZ and blah, 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 blah. So does that make me a slave? Okay. well, maybe we need a little bit more, a few more examples. Let's add a couple more details. I'm an Israelite, I'm living in Egypt, I am not allowed to leave Egypt if I want, and while I am there, and while I'm alive, they get to tell me what my job is and how much of it I gotta do, or else I starve. Slavery? Yes? Okay, so that means that if you work for a modern company and they give you a task and they tell you, we need you to work 18 hours a day and we need you to clean out the stables as well as to lift these heavy weights and also do the accounting in your free time. And if you don't do that, we won't pay you and then you'll starve. Is that slavery? What's that? You can get another job. You can get another job. It's just that easy. What's that? It's so easy, says somebody who hasn't looked for a job in how many years? Let's come back to that one. But let's hold in our mind that perhaps there is a little gray area there that we need to explore. But what happens if you are actually subject to physical and brutal corporal punishment for failing to perform your duties? You are whipped, you are manacled, you are in otherwise shape or form made to feel the pain of disobeying the person that is giving you orders. Slavery? Absolutely. All right. So what we need to do then is say, where do these things peter out? Because that's the classic view of slavery. But if we walk it back, if at one time you were beholden to a master who could punish you mercilessly and could deprive you of your freedom to leave and could order you to perform certain tasks, at what point does that begin to not be slavery? For example, fast forward to the Middle Ages. You are a serf. Now you have certain rights. The Lord is not supposed to just kill you whenever he feels like it. He's not supposed to hurt you unless you're failing to perform your serf duties, the proper reciprocity, like, doffing your cap or plowing the land as he has instructed. But technically, you can apply to move from where you live to another place. Now, you can't do that on your own, but you can ask for permission. And your Lord may give you permission to move into another village, into another town. Is that slavery or not? You get to keep a lot of what you grow. You get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You are mostly free. They're not telling you exactly what you have to do all the time. Is that slavery or not?
Indentured servitude.
Well, indentured servitude implies that there's a denture you can eventually overcome. That is to say that eventually you will no longer be in servitude, but serfdom was perpetual and it was hereditary. You were a serf to this lord and your kids would be a serf to that lord, and that was all there was to it. There wasn't a debt to be overcome. There wasn't a way out of serfdom unless you maybe saved the lord's life and then he might promote you to a freeman or something. Generally speaking, if you were born a serf, you died a serf, done. Which doesn't quite make indentured servitude the right term for it. But is slavery the right term for it? That's why it's called serfdom rather than slavery, because we were uncomfortable with that term. It is a slightly different version of slavery, and it gets its own title because of that, but also because Europe eventually was uncomfortable with recognizing that at any point between 70 and 90% of a local population were really more or less enslaved. It also began the process that we continue to see today, where the definition of slavery is held to such a high bar that things that are adjacent to slavery don't get called slavery, and thus they get a free pass. The same thing we've discussed that happens with anti-Semitism, where you're only technically an anti-Semite if you are as bad as Hitler, happens when it comes to the concept of slavery. People only want to use the term slavery if you are as bad as the slavery experience within the American South and the Caribbean and those types of situations. If it's not that bad, then it's just serfdom. It's just indentured servitude. It's just, the economic pressures of the time that have forced you into a difficult situation in which your choices are limited. and in which you can be severely hurt, but that's not slavery, because it's not identical to the worst versions of slavery the world has ever seen. We see the problem with making definitions like this, where we use the high watermark, or low watermark in morality sense, as being the only thing that fits that criteria. It makes us overlook many of the current issues. So, last night I spoke about a form of slavery which is unfortunately not usually referred to as slavery. I made mention of the scam calls and text messages that many people get that are used to try and lure people into various financial scams. You can watch the YouTube video later in the week when I upload it. And the people that are actually on the other end sending those text messages have been human trafficked, that is to say, bought and sold as slaves, to be put into giant centers, often in empty casinos in Cambodia and Myanmar that failed because of the COVID crisis, and forced to then reach out for hours and hours a day to Westerners in order to try and trick them out of their money. The people who are on those texts are not free to leave. They are not doing it because they want to, and they are certainly not enjoying the benefits of any of the money that they are able to scam out of their victims. And when they fail to do well enough, or if they give any pushback, they are tortured, beaten, and sometimes killed. I call that slavery. It's not just human trafficking, the sanitized term for it. It's not just indentured servitude. That's slavery. At this moment, we have about 50 million people that are in official forms, such as this, of slavery around the world. More people are in bondage now than ever before in human history. But there is also slavery-adjacent situations. People that are trapped in a process. If you were to, for example, as I did, travel to a foreign country to work for a foreign company, and while you are there, they ask to hold on to your passport for safekeeping. Slavery? Or do we say, oh, no, well, that's just, it's not nice, but it's, it's a little weird. Maybe they've invested a lot to bring you into the country. They want to make sure that you don't leave before they have regained the value they have spent on you, the investment they made in your labor. Why is that not slavery in our mind? If you are no longer free to leave and you are forced to work until you have paid off some imaginary debt, is that not slavery? We were talking before about just the Egyptians not letting us go back to the land of Israel as being slavery. You were all gung-ho for that. So why, if someone comes and decides that they want to cross the border and work in the field to make some money to send back to their family, and the person that's in charge says, I'll take your documents, and by the way, if you give me any lip, I'll turn you into immigration. You'll go to prison, your family will get nothing, or maybe something even worse will happen to you. But in the meantime, you'll still get pennies on the dollar for what I would have to pay for a local worker. We call that hiring illegal workers. We call that violating American immigration law. Why are the people who are involved in that from the top, the people who are hiring these people, who are holding on to their documents, who are preventing them from contacting authorities when there are gross violations of human rights and worker rights, why do we not call those people at the top what they are? Slavers. They are trafficking in people. They are engaging in slavery. Just because the people came across voluntarily, when their rights are stripped, we don't call them slaves? Because they maybe broke a law when they crossed the border, now they are not subject to all basic rights of human beings, and they can be enslaved, and we will not call those who engage in that slavery slavers? What is it that disconnects in our mind in those situations? Now, you might be thinking, yes, well, there are indeed some unfortunate people at the very bottom of the economic scale that are often pushed into dire circumstances, and sometimes, Rabbi Neely, I'll buy it, we'll call that slavery. It does happen, and we should work on that. Let's stamp that out. Okay, great. What about somebody that is at the other end of the professional scale? Somebody that is enticed into a new position, and the new position comes with a wonderful signing bonus, with all sorts of money from moving, a promised guaranteed salary for the first year, but somewhere in the 500-page contract that you're signing with this organization, Are the small lines that say, well, this is technically not actually a signing bonus, it's a signing loan. This isn't actually moving expenses, this is a moving loan. This isn't a guaranteed salary, this is a predicted salary based upon the amount of work you generate, the wealth that you bring in from seeing patients, from dealing with clients, from handling legal cases. And, if you don't happen to meet the quota, and we'll tell you, because we'll keep those records, then you actually owe us money at the end of the year. And if you can't pay it, don't worry, we'll just roll it into next year's system, and you can just owe us forever. Because it's a loan, we're setting the terms. And it can be more ruinous than even the worst of the credit card bills. This is the company store recreated across the economic scale. And yes, we can say, just move, get a new job. Sure, you can leave anytime you want to leave. It's Hotel California, after all. You can leave whenever you like, but when you leave, you have to cash out your chips. And according to our records, you still owe us $150,000. Well, be fine to go, but we're going to go into collections on that as soon as you leave. This is happening. It's not only affecting people at the other end of the economy. It's not only affecting people that are foreign. It's not only affecting people that somehow in our mind we might have already put into a category that we don't have to care about them as much. This is something that I can tell you I'm personally concerned that when my kids reach the age of employment and get out into the work world, that they know they are supposed to send any potential contract to me to review, and I will probably talk to one of our lawyers in the congregation to review, because I'm not a lawyer, to try and make sure that they are not signing away their future to somebody that would like to use the value of their work to make themselves richer while taking away their freedom to cease to do that work and find other opportunities. That is the fundamental definition of slavery. When another person has immoral control over you and your choices in a way that allows them to extract value from you, that is slavery. So make sure you got all of those pieces. When someone has an immoral control over you and is able to use you to extract value from you, that is slavery. We can talk about the high water marks of chattel slavery of the South, and we can talk about the more middling slavery of company stores, but in many circumstances, slavery can come even in more slippery forms. If I were to tell you in the ancient world that a slave owner, one of their primary concerns was to make sure that their slaves produced more slaves, you would all say, well, of course, that was what slavery was. They treated people like animals. They used them as animal husbandry, and that meant that the slave owner could order you, I want you and you have a baby. And if you didn't, well, then you would be beaten and hurt in other forms of punishment. Well, does that mean that in the modern world, if we tell people, you have no choice except to perhaps stay single and never touch another human being, because we are going to remove the right to have birth control. We're going to remove the right for you to decide whether you will carry a child to term or not. And we're doing so because, and publicly stated so, we believe it's better for our country, it's better for our community if we have more children. And congratulations, you are in the breedable age range. You've won the prize of providing that value to the community, whether you like it or not. Sure, there are ways that you could avoid it through actual birth control or other choices of aborting when necessary, but we're going to remove those choices from you because we believe the value that your baby will provide to the community is more important than the freedom for you to choose whether or not to have that. But you'd have to first say, well, who am I going to marry? Oh, don't worry. I'll tell you who you can and cannot marry. You want to marry somebody that I don't approve of, that they're a different race, that they are the wrong gender, they're from the wrong country? I'll tell you whether you can or can't marry them. I will put those laws in place in order that we will breed the right kind of people in our community. in order that we will have the right structure to our society. Now, you can have any job you want. You can live wherever you want, more or less. But who you love, what children you have, that I will tell you what to do. It may be a softer form of slavery than the version that was practiced in the American South. It doesn't meet that high water mark of the worst version the world has ever seen. But is there a fundamental difference between the master telling two slaves, you must have a child, and others telling you, you must have a child? Between the master saying, you and you will get married, but not you two, even though you came maybe as a couple. I'm splitting you up because I'm selling one of you to my neighbor, and the other one I want to breed with this one. Is there any difference in the society telling you, oh, no, I know that you say you love him or her, but that's not allowed here. If you want to get married, we'll tell you who's permissible. As someone who has a marriage that would have been illegal 60 years ago, this strikes close to home. As someone who is a human being, all of this should strike close to home. If you want to have the choice over what to do with your own body, you want to transition through your health care, I'm going to tell you no. Why? Because I believe I can extract more value from you by keeping you as you are, regardless of what you want to be. Is this not akin to slavery? When I tell you who you must be, what you must do, what you cannot do, who you can love, who you can be with, who you can even present yourself to the world, because I believe that by forcing you to do it my way, we will benefit. We will be able to extract value from your existence in a way that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. You are here to serve us, and your freedom is a secondary consideration. As long as what you want to do is within the parameters of what we think will benefit us most, will extract the greatest value from you, then you can have the illusion of freedom, because you've never walked up to the wall. But just because you were put into an enclosure large enough that you, through lack of perhaps curiosity or inclination, never noticed the bars, does not mean you are not still imprisoned. How big does a prison need to be before it's no longer a prison? It's always a prison, even if it is huge and you feel content in the middle, ignoring the walls that are around, or ignoring those that are trying to build walls around you. The concept of slavery is not an ancient scourge alone. The concept of slavery is not only what happens to those that are trafficked in the third world, forced to do labor in blazing suns or under brutal conditions, taken from their families and forced to work until they die, as has often been the case in the chocolate industry, which is one of the reasons we are doing our fair trade chocolate sales. Slavery comes in 1,000 different forms, and it often comes under the guise of things that we think we agree with, that sound plausible, reasonable, that we have a vested interest in how people express their own freedom in their private lives, because society. And while Judaism may have a lot to say, as we have a lot to say about everything, about the personal choices that each one of us makes, that does not mean that society should make those choices. Judaism can advocate, not because of the benefit that you bring to society, but because we believe that there is a spiritual connection to walking certain ways in life. We've got a lot of commandments, but we are not enslaved to the commandments. We are instead offered them as something that can benefit us, and if we choose not to, well, there isn't a Jewish prison for the violators of Judaism. Slavery continues to form a problem in every society. We have changed the name, and we have tried to hide from it, and we have tried to be on the side of the masters rather than the enslaved. But as long as one person is enslaved, then that means that all of us are at risk. As long as one person has their freedom stolen from them, that means all of our freedom could be taken from us. You may not be the target at the moment, Maybe some of the ones that I've listed may not be relevant or immediately connected to you or your family or anyone that you know. But if those people's rights are taken, are infringed, are hemmed in, if they are told who they can be, who they can love, where they can live, then what is to stop you from being told those same things? As Jews, we know what it is like to have those freedoms taken away. We have spent most of the last 2,000 years living in countries from Europe through the Middle East where those freedoms were not given to us in full measure. And we should not be so blind as to imagine that neither we nor anyone else would ever lose those freedoms. Slavery is a continual threat because there are always going to be those who believe that your primary value is to them. That your existence is waiting to add something to their life. That you, properly handled, could actually have worth. But without it, you are worthless. And as worthless, you deserve nothing. Judaism has said since the beginning that is not true of a single human being on this planet. We have continued to yell at the world that seems to not understand that. And we must continue to shout and yell. Slavery is not just the boogeyman of the Haggadah. It is still a crisis that we must face, and we must face it in all of its forms. Shabbat Shalom. Indeed, actually, as one of our congregants just mentioned, the residency and internships, often unpaid or overworked, do also certainly bump up against the slavery-adjacent treatment. And that's something that we can continue to discuss during our Kiddush luncheon or at any other time. As is always the case, although I imagine this particular sermon may have agitated more emotion than most, I am always available for even personal conversations and study to see some of the underlying or connected issues that are involved in what I have discussed today or at any time. I never want people to walk out of here thinking, now I understand, I'm good. I want you to walk out of here thinking, I'm looking at it differently than I did before, but I still have questions, and then ask them.